December 2nd, 1942, North Africa, 1610 hours. The desert wind carries grit like broken glass. Captain Luigi Ferraro squints across the hard, sun-bleached plain, binoculars pressed tight against his eyes. Heat shimmers above the sand, warping the horizon into something unreal. The British artillery has gone quiet. Too quiet. Ferraro lowers the binoculars and smiles. "Americani," he says, amused. "They always come late." Around him, officers of the Regio Esercito lean against a low stone wall near the edge of a dry wadi. Their uniforms are dusty but pressed. Their mood is almost relaxed. For weeks now, they've been hearing about the new American tank, the M4 Sherman, rolling into North Africa in growing numbers. Ferraro has seen one already, briefly, from a distance. Tall, boxy, thin-skinned. A target. They built it for factories, not battle, one lieutenant mutters, adjusting his cap. Too high, too clumsy. You hit it once, it burns like a torch. Laughter ripples through the group. Italian tank crews have learned to respect British armor, even fear it. But the Americans? New to the war, loud, predictable. Their equipment looks like it was designed by committee. Ferraro remembers the briefing. American tanks mass-produced like automobiles, simplified, standardized, cheap. Good for training, bad for survival. That's what everyone says. The sound reaches them first. Engines. Not one or two, many. A deep, mechanical growl rolling steadily across the plain. Ferraro raises his binoculars again. At first, he sees dust, then silhouettes, then shape. Shermans. A line of them cresting a low rise, sun glinting off steel. They advance without hesitation, turrets forward, infantry moving alongside in loose formation. Ferraro counts instinctively. 1, 2, 5, 10. More appear behind them. "Look at that height, like apartment buildings," the lieutenant scoffs. Ferraro nods. He knows the specifications. Thin frontal armor, high profile, a 75mm gun that struggles against heavier German designs. On paper, the Sherman is inferior. The Italian anti-tank guns are already laid in, range estimated, firing arcs clear. Ferraro gives the signal. The first shot cracks the air. A Sherman jolts as the round punches through its side armor. Flames lick out of the engine deck. The tank grinds to a halt, crew scrambling free. Cheers erupt along the line. "See?" someone shouts. "Americans!" A second Sherman is hit, then a third. Ferraro feels a familiar satisfaction, competence, control. This is how it's supposed to go. The Americans hesitate just for a moment. Then, they keep coming. The burning tanks are bypassed, not recovered, not defended, simply left. Fresh Shermans roll forward, closing the gaps without slowing. Ferraro frowns. That's odd. British crews usually pull back when they take losses, reassess, smoke the field, regroup. The Americans do not. Their artillery opens up, not wildly, but methodically. Shells walk forward, probing Italian positions with growing accuracy. Infantry advance behind the tanks, using them as moving cover. Another Sherman is hit, another burns, and another replaces it. Ferraro's gunners work fast, efficient, almost eager. They know they can kill these tanks, but something feels wrong. There are too many. The line doesn't thin, it thickens. Ferraro realizes he can no longer count them easily. Dust clouds merge, tracks churn the sand into a roiling mess. Smoke rises from wrecks, but behind the smoke, more steel appears. He hears one of his officers stop laughing. "Captain!" Ferraro keeps his binoculars raised. The Americans are not charging recklessly, they're advancing in rhythm. When one tank is knocked out, the next shifts position automatically, covering the gap. Their infantry stays close, coordinated by radio. Radio? Ferraro clenches his jaw. Italian units still rely on runners, on shots. The burning tanks are bypassed, not recovered, not defended, simply left. Fresh Shermans roll forward, closing the gaps without slowing. Ferraro frowns. That's odd. British crews usually pull back when they take losses, reassess, smoke the field, regroup. The Americans do not. Their artillery opens up, not wildly, but methodically. Shells walk forward, probing Italian positions with growing accuracy. Infantry advance behind the tanks, using them as moving cover. Another Sherman is hit, another burns, and another replaces it. Ferraro's gunners work fast, efficient, almost eager. They know they can kill these tanks, but something feels wrong. There are too many. The line doesn't thin, it thickens. Ferraro realizes he can no longer count them easily. Dust clouds merge, tracks churn the sand into a roiling mess. Smoke rises from wrecks, but behind the smoke, more steel appears. He hears one of his officers stop laughing. "Captain!" Ferraro keeps his binoculars raised. The Americans are not charging recklessly, they're advancing in rhythm. When one tank is knocked out, the next shifts position automatically, covering the gap. Their infantry stays close, coordinated by radio. Radio? Ferraro clenches his jaw. Italian units still rely on runners, on shouted orders, on hope that wires aren't cut. The Shermans roll on. A shell detonates near Ferraro's position, spraying stone fragments across the wall. He ducks instinctively. This isn't a probing attack. This is pressure, and it doesn't let up. After an hour, the Italian guns are overheating. Ammunition stocks thin. Barrels glow faintly in the late afternoon light. Ferraro orders a reposition. As they pull back, he glances once more at the field. The Americans have lost tanks, no doubt about it, but their line is closer now. Closer than before, as if nothing meaningful has happened. Ferraro feels a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not fear, confusion. He has always believed tanks were weapons, tools of maneuver, finite resources. What he is watching feels different. It feels like flow, like water pressing forward, filling every space. That evening, as the sun bleeds red into the desert, Ferraro receives a report. American armored units identified again, fresh, undamaged, advancing along a parallel axis. "How many?" he asks. The runner hesitates. "More than before, Captain." Ferraro says nothing. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, engines are still starting, crews still mounting up, tanks still rolling forward. Not the same ones, new ones. Ferraro stares into the darkening desert, the laughter from earlier already feeling like it belonged to another lifetime. He doesn't know it yet, but today was not a battle. It was an introduction. The night offers no silence. Even after the guns stop, the desert hums, engines idling, tracks grinding, the low murmur of men moving equipment under starlight. Captain Ferraro lies on his back beneath a canvas shelter, eyes open, listening. The Americans are still moving. By dawn, the truth becomes unavoidable. Ferraro climbs the ridge again, binoculars in hand. The air is cold now, the sand pale and firm. Smoke from yesterday's wrecks still rises in thin columns, marking where Shermans burned. But in front of those blackened hulks, more Shermans, clean, unscarred, lined up as if the day before never happened. Ferraro lowers the binoculars slowly. "You can't replace tanks overnight," one of his lieutenants says behind him, disbelief creeping into his voice. Ferraro doesn't answer. He watched the trucks arrive in the dark. Flatbeds, fuelers, recovery vehicles, mobile workshops with cranes and welding rigs. He watched crews work under blackout conditions, engines lifted, tracks replaced, radios swapped. Not miracles, procedure. The Americans hadn't retreated to recover. They had advanced logistics. By mid-morning, Italian positions are under pressure again. Not from the same direction, but from two axes now. The Shermans moved deliberately, not in reckless waves, but in coordinated thrusts supported by infantry and artillery. Ferraro orders fire. Again, they score hits. Again, Shermans burn. And again, the line keeps coming. What unsettles him most is the lack of reaction. No panic, no sudden reversals. When a tank is hit, the others do not falter. They adjust, close ranks, continue. Ferraro realizes the Americans are fighting with an assumption the Italians cannot afford, that losses are temporary. A shell bursts near his command post, knocking him to the ground. His ears ring, sand fills his mouth. When he stands, he sees one of his guns smashed, crew scrambling away. The radio crackles, German voices now, an Africa Corps liaison officer barking orders, frustration bleeding through clipped syllables. Ferraro listens, then responds. "We can stop them, but only where they choose to stop." The German officer doesn't reply. By afternoon, Ferraro's unit is ordered to fall back again. Another position abandoned, another line erased. As they move, Ferraro passes burned Shermans left where they fell. Crews already gone, tags attached, marked for later recovery. Even the wrecks are organized. That night, Ferraro writes in his journal by flashlight. He hasn't done this since before the war. He writes not to record events, but to understand them. They are not protecting their tanks, he writes. They are expending them. The realization lands heavily. Italian doctrine treats tanks as precious. Each one is counted, maintained with care, lost reluctantly. The Americans treat tanks as a stream. If one burns, another flows forward. Ferraro recalls something a German major once said, half joking. America fights wars the way it builds cars. At the time, it sounded like an insult. Now, it feels like prophecy. The next engagement confirms it. A coordinated American push supported by aircraft. Light bombers roar in low, dropping fragmentation bombs ahead of the Shermans. Dust and smoke blind Italian gunners. When the air clears, the tanks are already closer. Ferraro's men fight bravely, skillfully, but skill cannot outrun supply. By dusk, they're out of position again. Ferraro walks among his exhausted troops, offering brief words, claps on shoulders. He knows morale matters. He also knows truth does. And the truth is this: no matter how many Shermans they destroy, there are more waiting. Somewhere beyond the horizon, factories are running, assembly lines humming, ships unloading, trains moving. The desert is only the final mile of a much longer road. Ferraro feels the laughter from the first day fade completely. In its place is something colder. Understanding. If the Americans keep coming like this, there will be no moment of collapse, no single decisive battle, just pressure, relentless, measured, inescapable. Ferraro looks east, toward Tunisia, toward the narrowing map, and for the first time he wonders not how to stop the Sherman, but how long they can endure its arrival. By January 1943, the desert has become a corridor, not a battlefield in the old sense, but a channel through which the Americans pour men and machines with mechanical regularity. Captain Ferraro feels it every day now. Pressure without pause, attacks without drama, movement without hesitation. He no longer asks how many Shermans are coming. He asks how quickly. From a rocky overlook near the Meroth line, Ferraro watches another American armored column advance. The light is sharp, winter clean, revealing everything. There is no attempt to concealment, no urgency, just inevitability. Ferraro notices details now he once ignored. The spacing between vehicles, the steady intervals, the way damaged tanks are immediately tagged and bypassed, not fought over. How recovery crews follow the fighting line like shadows. This is not courage, this is organization. During a brief lull, Ferraro speaks with a German panzer officer, Oberlieutenant Kramer, his face hollow from weeks of retreat. "They don't fight like us," Kramer says, watching the horizon. "They fight like a factory." Ferraro nods. Kramer continues, voice low. "We break through, they replace. We counterattack, they absorb. It's like hitting rubber." Ferraro understands exactly what he means. The Sherman's weaknesses are real: high silhouette, thin armor, vulnerable ammunition storage. Ferraro's gunners exploit these every chance they get, and it changes nothing. Because the Sherman is not meant to win duels, it is meant to arrive, over and over. Ferraro sees the proof one afternoon when American units pause, not to retreat, but to refuel. Fuel trucks roll forward under cover of smoke, hoses connect, engines stay running. In minutes, the tanks are ready again. Ferraro thinks of Italian fuel shortages, of rationed movements, of tanks that fight only when permission is granted. Here, the Americans fight because they can. As January turns to February, the noose tightens, Tunisia shrinks, ports fall, supply routes vanish, the Axis line compresses, bending but never breaking, because breaking would mean annihilation. Ferraro overhears whispers now among officers. They'll never stop. They don't need to win fast. They're everywhere. One night, Ferraro receives a captured American technical manual. He flips through it by lantern light. The language is dry, practical, no heroics, just procedures. Replace track in 45 minutes. Engine swap in field conditions. Crew rotation schedules. This is war without romance. Ferraro closes the manual slowly. The Sherman makes sense now. It is not a knight. It is a cog. A cog designed to be swapped instantly. In late February, Ferraro witnesses the final proof. An Italian battery knocks out 4 Shermans in under 10 minutes. Flames rise, smoke billows. For a brief moment, the line holds. Then new tanks appear from the rear. Not rushed, not dramatic, just there. Ferraro laughs once, quietly, bitterly. "So that's it," he murmurs. That night, as the desert cools rapidly, Ferraro writes again in his journal. "We are not fighting tanks, we are fighting throughput." He closes the book. The next day, orders arrive. Prepare for withdrawal toward the coast, final defensive positions. Ferraro looks at his men, tired, capable, outmatched not by skill, but by scale. He understands now what the Sherman truly represents. Not American arrogance, American confidence. The certainty that if one fails, another will arrive, and another, and another. Ferraro watches the horizon as engines rumble again. The dust clouds rise, familiar now. The Sherman keeps coming, and with it, the end draws closer, not in a crash, but in a steady advance that cannot be outrun. March 1943 brings the sea into view. For the first time since the campaign began, Captain Ferraro can smell salt in the air. The Mediterranean glints beyond the low hills, beautiful and indifferent. Tunisia has narrowed to a corner now. There is nowhere left to trade space for time. Ferraro studies the map spread across the hood of a staff car. The lines are no longer defensive belts, they are holding actions. Names of villages overlap, arrows point inward from every direction. And behind every arrow, he knows what is coming. Shermans. The Americans do not rush this final phase. They probe, pause, then advance again. Artillery fires with mathematical patience. Air support arrives on schedule. Supply trucks roll forward even as shells fall, their drivers unfazed. Ferraro watches one such convoy from a ridge. Fuelers, ammunition trucks, mobile workshops, all moving closer to the front. He realizes something then that sends a chill through him. The Americans are shortening their supply lines. Each advance makes the next easier. Every Sherman that arrives now has less distance to travel than the last. Italian counterattacks grow smaller, shorter, desperate. A night raid here, an ambush there. They inflict damage, they always do. But the morning always looks the same. Burned tanks in the foreground, fresh ones behind them. Ferraro's unit is tasked with holding a crossroads overlooking a narrow valley. It is a good position, elevated, overlapping fields of fire, the kind of place that would have mattered earlier in the war. At dawn, the Americans come. Shermans roll forward in staggered formation, infantry close, artillery already adjusting. Ferraro directs fire personally, his voice steady, precise. Hit, burn, hit, burn. For a moment, the advance slows, then it resumes. More Shermans crest the ridge. Ferraro feels it then, something giving way inside him. Not panic, not despair. Acceptance. The realization that this position, like all the others, exists only to be consumed. The radio crackles, German voices, Italian voices, orders overlapping, contradicting, dissolving into static. Ferraro makes a decision. He orders his men to disengage before they are encircled. Some protest. Pride dies hard. But Ferraro is done sacrificing men to prove points that no longer matter. They withdraw under fire, losing one gun, then another. American shells bracket the road with frightening accuracy. Airburst fragments rattle against steel and stone. When they reach the next fallback position, Ferraro counts heads. Too few. That night he sits alone, helmet beside him, listening to the distant thunder of engines. The sound is constant now, it never fully fades. He thinks back to the laughter, the jokes about height and thin armor, the confidence that American inexperience would make up for American numbers. They were wrong. Experience matters, but replacement matters more. Ferraro finally understands the true cruelty of the Sherman. It does not need to be the best tank, it only needs to arrive. Again and again. In April, rumors spread of surrender, of evacuation, of negotiations that go nowhere. No one speaks openly, but everyone knows. Ferraro's final engagement comes without ceremony. Another advance, another defense, another withdrawal. This time there is nowhere left to go. White flags appear along the line. Ferraro orders his men to cease fire. The silence that follows is heavy, unnatural. American soldiers approach cautiously, weapons ready, but faces calm. They are not triumphant, they are efficient. An American officer meets Ferraro near a burned-out Sherman. The tank still smokes faintly. "Good fight," the officer says, almost reflexively. Ferraro nods. "You had more." The officer pauses, then smiles slightly. "Yeah, we did." As Ferraro walks away from the battlefield, he looks back one last time. The Shermans are already moving forward, past the wrecks, past the bodies, past the places where men believed they could stop them. The Sherman does not celebrate, it does not pause, it just keeps coming. May 1943 arrives quietly. No final charge, no dramatic last stand, just exhaustion settling over the land like dust after a convoy passes. Captain Luigi Ferraro sits on a crate near a temporary holding area, his helmet's resting on his knees, hands still stained with oil and sand. The fighting is over. Around him, Italian and German soldiers wait in loose groups, guarded but not mistreated. American trucks roll past in the background, engines humming steadily, already moving supplies forward for the next phase of the war. Ferraro watches them with a strange detachment. The same trucks, the same rhythm, even now. An American sergeant hands out water. Ferraro accepts the canteen, nods and thanks. The sergeant barely looks at him, already focused on the next task, the next movement, the next checklist. Ferraro drinks slowly. Weeks later, in a prisoner camp far from the desert, Ferraro is assigned to unloading cargo, crates, fuel drums, spare parts, all marked, all logged, all moving with quiet efficiency. He recognizes the stenciling. He recognizes the system. One afternoon, a younger Italian officer whispers to him, "If we had stopped them earlier, do you think?" Ferraro shakes his head gently. "No," he says, "because stopping them once was never enough." That night, lying on his bunk, Ferraro stares at the wooden ceiling above him. He thinks back to December, to the jokes, the laughter, the confidence. They had judged the Sherman as a tank. They should have judged it as a message. The Sherman was not designed to win admiration. It was designed to arrive on time, to be repaired quickly, to be replaced endlessly. It was not a masterpiece. It was a promise. Ferraro understands now that the Americans did not win because their tank was better. They won because losing it didn't matter. Years later, long after the war, Ferraro would explain it simply to anyone who asked. "We destroyed them," he would say, again and again. Then he would pause, and then more came. The laughter never returns, because once you understand what keeps coming, you never laugh again.